Welcome to the Local Dive podcast. This is Alex Scott, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, Dean and Sarah, and Ashlyn Portero. How you guys doing?
Doing good.
Good. It's great to be back.
Yeah,
I'm enjoying these conversations. They've been fun.
Welcome to another episode of the Local Dive. We're excited to take a deep dive into really what the church's response to COVID-19 should look like as we consider re-entry and having services again, and how we think about this issue from a Christian perspective. But before we get to the heavy stuff, we're going to spend some time in the shallow end. And so we got a little summer edition of the classic game, Would You Rather? And so given that it is the summer, vacations are on the mind. Dean, you have something you need to say.
Well, I'm nervous.
Like
we have not seen these questions, so Ashlyn just developed them over there. So
well, I had a little help from BuzzFeed, so
oh, even better.
Nice.
We're keeping it shallow for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so I'll start with the first one. In the spirit of summer vacation, would you rather spend your summer vacation at the beach or in the mountains?
Oh, not even close for me. Mountains by a mile. And I just got back from there, actually. I had a good friend's wedding up in the upstate of South Carolina. We had to spend a couple days in the Asheville area before that. Oh, mountains all the way. Especially being from Florida. So I can go to the beach anytime. Just give me the mountains.
I would spend mine at the beach. I am growing more team pool as I get older, but I would still spend it at the beach.
Yeah, I'm gonna choose the beach because it just feels like the right answer, but I'm not against the mountains, especially North Carolina. Like it's beautiful, but I don't know, something about the beach.
Well, at the beach you get sand on you.
This is true.
Gosh.
It's a small price to pay.
Yeah, so
Just think of like mountain dirt as like northern sand.
Mountain dirt.
Northern sand.
Not that you're getting any kind of mountain dirt on you.
Yeah, totally not happening.
What is mountain dirt? I just sort of came up with it.
I don't know.
It's the things that next to the creeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, just remember in Psalm
Things
120,
next to the
when
creek.
Psalm 121, I have biblical evidence. The psalmist did not say, "I fix my eyes," or "I look my eyes into the beach." He said, "The mountains, the hills."
It's fair.
So I've got on my side.
All right.
All right, I've got one. Would you rather have mosquito immunity or sunburn immunity?
Mosquito, for sure. Because I don't get sunburnt like taking my trash out, but I get attacked by mosquitoes anytime I go outside. So I am for sure mosquito immunity, and I will lather in sunblock all summer long.
That's fair.
My oldest son, Tommy, I think would do anything for mosquito immunity. The poor kid. I mean, he just walks outside and has 8 bites on him. I would say sunburn, not that I'm outside with my shirt off that often, or ever.
Thanks for
Thank you.
clarifying.
But I never give up my mosquitoes. Like Tommy and I can be standing next to each other outside. He'll have 12 bites. I'll have 0. I don't know the science behind that. I never really looked into it before, but I truly don't get bit.
Interesting. I would go mosquito too, because I feel like sunscreen or sunburn immunity is kind of like, it's sort of what you said, Alex. Like, if you're a responsible adult, like, you can do something about that. But I guess you could put bug spray on too.
Yeah, but then you smell like bug spray. Like, it's socially acceptable
right kind,
to walk
though.
into Walmart and smell like the beach and like sunscreen. I don't feel like you can walk into Walmart smelling like bug spray. I don't know. It just,
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, you could. I guess it's Walmart, but Dean's never been.
Or you do one in the same. One of our church members, Steve Schaefer, owns a company that is a sunscreen bug spray mosquito repellent.
There you
so
go.
He's got it,
Yeah.
He's got it covered.
So there we go.
All right,
That's
well,
the
I
answer.
have one more. On the topic of going shirtless, I'm not going to answer this question. Would you rather go barefoot for a day or shirtless for a day, and you can't give any disclaimers?
Shirtless.
So you can't be the guy who walks in Publix and is like, I lost a bet and I'm having to go shirtless for the day. Like, you just have to own it.
Oh.
No disclaimers.
Barefoot with every... I cringingly say barefoot because of the no disclaimers.
Yeah, I'm going shirtless.
There you go.
So you're just rolling into Trader Joe's showing the whole chest.
I mean, I can't.
You're
I
like
can't,
Nipples McGee walking into Publix.
I can't give
Oh my gosh.
disclaimers, but I've got delicate feet, so yeah, I'm going shirtless.
I will come pick you up at the county holding site.
So,
I'm just like thinking if you're like, on vacation with your family and you just walk into like the ice cream store, like, I mean, that might be the one place where it's like they're like, yeah, but like it's summer and it's the ice cream store. Like,
It's the
he doesn't have
beach.
shoes, but like whatever. We'll
hopefully
let
they
him
have a
slide.
walk-up window, and I'm just good. I don't even have to go
Yeah,
inside.
there you go. There you go.
I mean, this kind of is similar to the first question. Would you rather be on the beach or in a pool on the beach? If you have to choose. Like, Dean, you're not going to the beach, but if you had to choose.
A pool.
I'd rather be in a pool on the beach too.
Yeah. No one's ever been stung by a stingray in a pool, to my knowledge.
That's true. Or bitten by a shark in a pool.
I mean, to me, like, top 5 most miserable first world things is like being in the middle of the summer at the beach and having to walk back to like your car or your beach house after you've been out on the beach. It's just, I've never seen anyone look like they're enjoying themselves while they're doing that.
Yeah. And you're walking to your car that's now like 172 degrees.
Man.
Takes, half the ride home to cool down. That is kind of brutal.
Pool all day.
All right, I have another one. I just thought of this one. This is just off the top of the head. Just is probably just sick and disturbing. All right, would you rather have a severe sunburn and just get slapped across the back, like so hard, like somebody just like open palm, like slaps you as hard as they can right on your back, and you have a really bad sunburn? Or would you rather have a cut on your leg and you have to walk and stand in the ocean for 30 seconds?
I'm gonna go with.
That's so random.
I'm gonna go with. You're just wishing harm on people here. I'm gonna go stand in the water, in the beach.
With the cut.
Unless there was a flesh-eating bacteria from last year at the Gulf Coast.
Oh, I did not think about that.
So as long as that is not in the news, then I'm doing the beach, because that's the big hand slap on the back sunburn. That is like top.
There's like nothing worse.
That is a highly
than,
ranked pain.
Yeah. That's the word. Like you're in like the lobby at church, and somebody comes up to you, "Hey, brother." Smacks you right on the back. You're like, you didn't know I was sunburned. Thanks. Can you go for the handshake next time? Which I guess now, no.
You're totally immune from that now.
Yeah, I was gonna say, in a COVID world, you're good. I guess that's probably the best segue that we're gonna get from the shallow end into the deep dive. And so we're, recording this as things, at least where we live here in Florida, are starting to reopen. Things are starting to see, I guess you could say, signs of life in the economy and in businesses and restaurants and things reopening. I saw today Disney and Universal have plans to reopen. And so really probably, I know in a lot of discussions that we're having internally and externally, we're trying to think through and process what it really looks like to be faithful in this time and also, kind of shepherd our people and help people return to some sense of normalcy, some sense of gathering, even though things are not going to be like they were, on February 1st. And so as we think about this, just kind of off the top of, your heads, how should church leaders be thinking through what it looks like to gather again?
The first thing that comes to my mind is very carefully, and to really have almost overboard of conversations where you're sick of talking about it, because it might take that long to really flush it out, and for things that come up you hadn't considered yet, and for people to help you flush out your opinions, because we all come with opinions to it, and our opinions are all formed by who we listen to, right? Like what I think about the virus probably is based on who I follow on social media, what news I watch, what articles I watch, those type of things. The same is probably true of anyone. That's what we know is what we're fed, right? So I think very carefully, and that's the first thing that comes to mind is I think we have to be okay with the same conversation happening over and over again with different details attached to it. And that can get annoying, and that can get like, oh, seriously going to talk about this again? But like we really, I think, just have to keep talking through every scenario, not because we'll reach a perfect answer, but because we've seriously had to stretch ourselves and think about this as carefully and as wisely as we possibly can.
Yeah.
I think, too, there is maybe sometimes a tendency, like not just in this situation, but then it would apply here, to feel like you need to do more or speak out of your like realm of expertise. And so for church leaders, like we're not trying to give an analysis of this virus, or we're not epidemiologists, and we're not doctors. We're not trying to make our statement on what the virus is or what the pandemic is. Like we're trying to figure out church. And so I think it's good, like Dean, even just to tag off of what you're saying, like to have humility and to have a lot of conversations, but also to remember like what we're trying to figure out is taking the information that we have, asking the Lord to give us wisdom, and then making an informed decision about gathering and about caring for our people, like doing what we know how to do, and even that we're not going to do perfectly. But so I think just one of the pressures that church leaders can face sometimes is feeling like you have to, because people do look to you as sort of a voice and an authority figure, but feeling maybe some of the external pressure to do more than you really have to do, which is like in this moment, it's most important for us to figure out when is it safest for us to be able to return to gathering in these current circumstances. And so really just staying laser focused on what that is, while also doing what we've been doing, which is giving care to people and discipling people, like staying focused on the main objectives of what we've been called to do, I think it's easy to drift from that.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I would add is, and we've tried to do this, it's really important to know where your people are, because, different churches, even in the same city, may be kind of at different places because they're made up of different people. And so, we've tried to have individual conversations with people on our staff to gauge, because our staff hasn't all been at the same place at the same time thinking about this in the exact same way. And so because we are influenced by people we're around, by family, by news, by social media, things like that, but also realizing that the church down the street may have a very different makeup, a very different size dynamic. Like there's all sorts of things that factor in. And so really at the end of the day, I think you have to know where your people are, and sometimes either maybe bring them to where they should be, or in some cases maybe that means slowing them down, but just helping them think through that. And so I guess that's another thought that I've been wrestling with, is what does it look like to disciple people in the midst of this, in terms of how does Christ inform the way that and what we believe to be true about the scriptures, and loving our neighbor, which seems to be kind of a hot phrase right now. Like how does that factor into discipleship conversations in the midst of this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think we have to keep pointing people back to the words of Jesus. So, we have to stay connected to the scriptures, and in whatever weekly online broadcasts or whatever your church's sort of corporate teaching looks like right now, we have to still stay connected to those spiritual disciplines and encourage people to do the same. And I definitely like what you said, Alex, about wanting to be able to understand where people are, and then also encourage them along. If somebody is caught in despair or fear that's paralyzing, or that is sort of distorting their view of reality, we should be able to bear their burdens with them, and then point them to hope and to security in Christ. So that would be like one example. So I think we do have to be it's kind of a new opportunity to see people afresh without worrying about all of the other things that you have to balance and that are going on. Like we're able right now to just really talk to people and see people, and not be quite as loaded down by programs and administrative duties that are normally there. And some of those things are still there, and they're just different, and those are all good things in and of themselves. But I do think there's maybe just a more real look at what we're all, because we're all facing like the same thing. We're all kind of bonded by this one common experience. So those are just a few thoughts, but I definitely think just continuing to point people to the words of Christ, and bearing with one another, and also being willing to listen to someone and say, I may not agree with you, or the way that you see this, or the way that you're interpreting this, or I may even strongly disagree, but I'm not going to just concede to your opinion, or say that that's right. Like I'm gonna continue to ask the Lord for wisdom to go about every day, but to show love and grace to people, and to say to remember that we're all experiencing this together, and then we're also experiencing it individually. And I think that's something that the body of a local church brings, is this sort of corporate and common community in which we can all process and experience in a safe and trusted place. So
do you think that agreement and loving your neighbor is too oftentimes like put together to be the same thing? So like, if you don't agree with me, you don't love me. And how do we get people to see that there can be room for disagreement on a topic, whether it's a pandemic and how to respond and reopen, or a myriad of other topics? But like, I think right now in culture, we see too oftentimes it's like, if you don't agree with me, you don't love me. And so how do we walk with people through that?
Well, that's the world's wisdom. And how often do we, without even realizing it, embrace the world's wisdom, and it becomes so normal to us that we're not being transformed by the renewing of our minds, instead of being conformed to the patterns of this world. And I think we've kind of lost the ability to have a hard conversation. Now, there's things you shouldn't say on social media that's just not worth your time, and it's just ridiculous to. It's just unwise to. But there should be friends we're able to kind of have some hard conversations with, or maybe not even hard, just intense conversations with, and then know that, like, it's okay afterwards. We just disagree. But, like, there's enough trust built. We're assuming the best. Like, I do know you. I just know that we just have a different opinion on this. That's just like a lost art in Christian conversation. And also, one thing I've kind of learned through the pandemic, and I think this is a good lesson, is social awareness and knowing who you can talk to things about and who you probably shouldn't on certain topics. Yeah. Like, I might push an issue and go, she doesn't ever really respond, or he doesn't really respond whenever I talk to it. So this is probably not the best. I think this person disagrees with me strongly. It just doesn't know how to tell me because maybe I'm their boss or just whatever it might be. They don't know me that well, something along those lines. So it had that kind of feel to it. Other people were, wow, we really can have an engaging conversation about this, because I really do have these 5 things on my mind regarding this that I'd really like to kind of dump on somebody and hear their feedback on it. And so there's really certain people. It doesn't make that person better than the other person. Mm-hmm. It just means different people have different temperaments, different issues, and there's different topics that other people maybe are more sensitive about or whatever it might be. So I think part of discipleship is just having that situational and social awareness, and I'm learning that as kind of I go through this. Some of the things I maybe could talk about a little more openly early on, I don't as much now, or vice versa. Certain things I maybe was silent on when we first started this whole, the whole lockdown and everything else, that I didn't say a word about. Maybe I'm a little more vocal in certain settings in front of certain people about those things. But I just think we have to stop that. It's just so, think about just how self-centered I'm being, and even narcissistic, when I think you have to agree with me in order to be in right relationship with me. Mm-hmm. And just think about that. I mean, I'm at my most just self-loving moments without even realizing it. When I had that mindset of, you have to agree with me on this in order for us to be in fellowship, for us to be friends, even to be able to hang out together and have a good relationship. Like, I never want someone to stop being my friend or not want to be around me because I give that vibe. And that's far too often not talked about enough in Christian circles, because we have it kind of goes back to postmodernism. Mm-hmm. If we want to make it kind of technical about it, I'm sure it goes back even further than that. But that, like, this is my truth, where my experience is my experience. You can never even question it, challenge it, have a conversation about it, because I have experienced this, and you can't even push back, or you're someone who doesn't show grace, or you're shaming, or we need new definitions on words. That's one other thing we learned from this. Like, what does it actually mean to shame somebody? Mm-hmm. Those kind of things. But I think the roots of this are pretty problematic. We dig below the surface and wonder why we got here, and how many Christians have adopted it and not even realizing that we have.
So on that topic, if really, and this idea of showing grace or shaming people, let's say that I'm somebody who is very adamant that I should wear a mask, and so should everyone around me. And I have a great friend who just says, like, I've looked at, the World Health Organization and the CDC differ on who they say should wear a mask. Like, as of the time that we're recording this, their publications are different. So let's say somebody reads one and says, I don't meet the criteria that the World Health Organization lays out, and somebody else says, but the CDC says this. What does it actually mean to show grace for those people, even though they disagree? Like, how can I show grace to the person who, even though I may fiercely disagree with them, differs from me?
Man, you came with the tough stuff today.
I know.
Go for it, Ashlyn.
Man, thanks, guys. Honestly, I don't know. I can give, like, my thoughts. I'm not an authoritative person to speak on this, but I guess I would say, to start, maybe it depends on the setting that you're in and who it is. So if you go to get your hair cut and your barber asks you to wear a mask, to me, like, that's just a no-brainer. Like, just respect the person who owns that business, and it's they have the authority to set the rules of their business. And so if you don't want to wear a mask there, like, don't go there. Those kinds of things I think are very simple. I went to Trader Joe's for the first time a few weeks ago, and I didn't even think about it, and I brought one of my own reusable bags. And which I like never do. I was actually really proud of myself because that was like one of 5 times that I've ever done that. So let me just clarify that I'm not good at being the person who brings my reusable bags. And they didn't let me bring it in because it had come from my house, and I'm assuming like I've touched it and all of that. And so that's something to me that it's like, why would I make a big deal out of that? Like, so I don't use the bag, it's not the end of the world. If it's something where maybe it's a friend who says, hey, I have a vulnerable family member and I'm not comfortable being around people unless they're wearing masks. That is, I think, a decision that they've made for their family with a need and within a reason. And so do I think if you're going to go to that person's house, it's loving your neighbor to wear a mask there, like that you can make that sacrifice, and moving, going into that person's space and saying, okay, this is what you've asked, so I'm going to respect that, and I'm going to wear a mask. I also don't think it gives that person the right to morally indict you for not wearing a mask every single place you go, or not also implementing that same practice. So I do, but I also think it's so hard because there are some people who are going to do whatever they're going to do because they've sort of surveyed the scene and they've said that, in my mind, this is the best way to be, and anybody who isn't like this is wrong. Okay, that's obviously that's just a really difficult way to live in general. Like, I don't think that makes your life very fun, but there are other people who it's so hard because every person that we talk to or come in contact with might have a different reason for what, like, everybody has reasons for why they do things, whether they're conscious or subconscious. And so it's just hard because, I think when we're talking to people, if somebody, if we're talking about coming back to church and somebody says, well, I'm not going to be there unless every single person is wearing a mask, and you guys are just crazy if you don't have that rule in place. What I probably first need to do, and this is so hard, and I'm not very good at this, what I first need to do, I think, is stop, listen to that person, and remember, why is it that this person is responding in this way? It might be because they're angry and they are on a high horse and they just think that that's the best thing to do. It might also be because they have a sick family member or because they're just scared. And so I think if we can have just a few seconds of pause to say, I don't know why the person is responding the way that they are, I can either ask them or I can just still engage in love and grace and patience. Even if I disagree, then that goes much farther. Even if we say, hey, at the end of the day, in the phase that we come back in our church, whenever that is, if masks aren't required then or needed then or even strongly suggested, like whatever that looks like, or it doesn't even have to be a mask, but I know that's the example that you used. No one is going to agree with every single thing, but we're going to do the best we can to keep people safe and to create an environment where people can come and participate and also respect the differences that we might have for the most part as best we can. So I know that was like a long tangent, but those are just kind of general thoughts that I have.
That was really helpful. This has been a struggle for me, and probably because self-denial doesn't come naturally in our fallen state. Yes, we're redeemed people, but we still have our fallen nature. So I think that we're not boasting on ourselves, but sometimes I think like little small victories of growth in our life we can celebrate with brothers and sisters, I would hope, So for me, things like wearing the mask, I hate wearing a mask. And first world problems, I wear glasses. So when I walk anywhere, I guess I breathe through my nose too much. I don't know what it is. I mean, my glasses are fogged up. Total first world problems, right?
Cosign.
But so Paul said, I become all things to all people. What's the purpose? So I can win some. Mm-hmm. It's about the mission. So he says that I become to the Jews, I become like a Jew. To the Greeks, I become like a Greek. So my mom said something to me, I don't know, a couple weeks ago. I was at her house, and she was like, you need to be wearing a mask when you go out in public. And I was like, gosh, seriously? And this is before it really became a thing to wear masks. Because, if we're really honest, it changes all the time. Mm-hmm. And that's where grace is really needed. And we've come into a place right now, and this is not an event, this is just reality, that one thing we've learned from all this is that feelings, for probably all of us, oftentimes matter more than data. That's a ministry lesson for us to learn. Because a lot of times nowadays, we get always thrown in our faces, data says, and data says, and data says. It's like, okay, but feelings override that. Because I could send you 15 articles for the most reputable organizations that are saying this, and if you don't feel that way, it doesn't really matter. Mm-hmm. Same with me, right? Yeah. So it was like someone texted me the other day that 2020 is the year that data died. because it really you can almost make it do whatever you want it to do. So that's how I'm not a data-driven guy, but when I see all these things, I'm like, okay, like it's the mask. Like last week you should wear a mask. Now you like what is it? So my mom says to me, she's like, so it's up to me. I would not wear a mask like ever. It's just in my own human state. My mom's like, well, because of who you are in town. Now, my mom probably thinks I'm more famous than I actually am or known or whatever, but says you're the pastor of a church and you don't want people to think that you don't care, that you have your own agenda. I was just like, listen, Mom, like, oh my gosh, Mom, seriously? But she was right. And I'm not talking about, I'm not only that pretentiously, but in terms of like, again, I'm a pastor of a large church in this city, a town I grew up in. And so today, here's an example. I went into Starbucks today. Shocker. That could be any day. That's a timeless quote.
Multiple times a day.
And I have a mask, and I put it on before I went into Starbucks. And the reason why I put it on is I have worked really hard to build relationships at my Starbucks for a very long time. And I don't want anyone there when I walk in there to think that I just don't care about them or I'm not considering their feelings or anything like that. So again, everything in my body wants to be like, get over it. You're going to be fine. You're behind a plexiglass anyways, and you all have masks on. You're like, and that's the rational side who wants to say all those things. That doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. That doesn't matter. So what do you know? To kind of do what Ashlyn was talking about. I'm just curious. I want to start conversations. So I said to them, I said, hey, they're like, hey, Dean, when I walked in, again, I know these people. And I said, hey, do you want me to wear a mask? Like, I'm wearing it regardless, but like, would it make you feel uncomfortable if I didn't? I just wanted to know. And I wasn't going to change if I put my mask on or not. I just was curious where they were. Like, how do you actually feel? So one of the ladies there said, no. She said, no, but I appreciate it. And I said, yeah, how come? I didn't say that flippantly, but that's why I wanted to know, how come? And she said, well, what do you know? I'm like, holy cow. She says, I'm a cancer survivor, and my immune system is still pretty compromised. So I would never tell you to wear one because I don't think I have a right to do that. But I do appreciate that you would. And I was like, something that's another person that matters more than me. And I preach a Bible every week that says in Philippians 2 to consider others more important than yourselves. So to quote The Rock, my favorite wrestler of all time, it doesn't matter what you think. Yeah. Like, it doesn't matter what I think. I might be wrong anyways, right? It doesn't matter what I think in these kind of circumstances. It matters that I be a Jew to the Jews and a Greek to the Greek. And again, this has been a stretch for me and a growing time for me. I have pretty strong opinions about a lot of these things. And I'll talk about it in person. I think we do need to talk about these kind of things in person. One of my really good friends is an infectious disease doctor. I text him every single day. I want to check on him, see how he's doing. He's working really hard right now. But I ask him a lot of questions. So I do feel for a major, major layperson, like way at the bottom of the totem pole, that I have a pretty good source for information. I'm close to several doctors in our church and family members. So like, I'm curious. I'm asking these things. I'm not a conspiracy guy. Nowhere even near that. I'm just going, okay, what is true and what's not in terms of how we're supposed to be. Here's what's non-negotiable. We're supposed to be for other people as Christians. Yeah. So for the person out there, it's like, this is dumb. I'm not wearing a mask. Okay, you're allowed to think this is dumb. You might even be right. But you're not allowed to say who cares. Because a lot of people care. And your job as a Christian, this is a growth thing. This is not natural for us. This is hard for us. I'm almost like everybody. For me, okay? Because my first instinct is to be selfish, right? I can't follow Jesus and be selfish. They're not compatible. So that's kind of where I'm at. Is that type of what my mom told me a few weeks ago, and what I even experienced for myself today. So now when I go into grocery stores, I went to Chick-fil-A for lunch today. I put a mask on. I just did takeout. I went to Starbucks today, put a mask on. Not because I'm some awesome person, but because I am fighting the urge to not think of others before myself. And I'm just declaring. I'm having to personally. This is just real talk. I mean, I'm going to personally declare war on that every single day, and to say your opinion on this does not matter. What matters is how you represent Jesus to these people. And something as simple as, he's the pastor of City Church, and look, I'm just walking in here not wearing a mask. He didn't care about anybody. He's just, man, that'd be awful. And I don't want to undo in just something as controllable as that. The ministry we've built here for a long time, which could happen for even one person. Jesus let the 99 to go find the one, right? Yeah. If one person is like that guy, he's just this arrogant, whatever it might be, that's a big deal. So I hope you all just hear my heart in that. That's real. And that's kind of where I'm at. Yeah, no,
just listening to that, it felt like I was in row 2 on a Sunday morning. You were preaching, and it was good. I mean, it's convicting to hear that and to think about that, even as I bring kind of my own perspective on that. And I think the thing that in this issue, and even like other issues that where I think I want to find some balance and grace, and where, to win the Jew, like or the Greek or whatever the case may be, like. To model that, and at the same time, in the other hand, hold Romans 14 and not bind the conscience of another. because I think there is a tension there, and I don't know what that looks like. And so I think that's something that I'm trying to wrestle with, is like, how can I hold my view? And maybe that is, you know what, I need to wear a mask everywhere I go because I'm concerned about the perception of other people, for the sake, not for the sake of like my pride or what people think of me, but for the sake of mission. And at the same time, extending grace to those people who aren't where I am.
Yeah. Now, if you wear one by yourself driving, I'm going to judge the mess out of you. But,
maybe they're an Uber driver and they're mandated.
But amen to everything else.
I do think that I was thinking about this as you were talking, and at some point you said maybe it was just like whether somebody thinks they're right or not in what they're doing. I think that there is like maybe sometimes this underlying anxiety that we have too, of like, we don't know necessarily if we're right or wrong in this situation. I think there's like this innate need in us, and maybe even thinking about like church leaders where you know, every week we're making decisions about like what is right for our church, like how things are going to go. Like I know we've talked about this before, I think even on this podcast, like in the day-to-day and in life as it was, our weeks are filled with things that we're not actually in control of, like when we think about it, but you know, at our disposal, like that we can make decisions about and have some control over how the week goes in some sense. It, you know, and again, like I say that as like knowing that God is in control of everything and it's really him working through us, but you guys get what I'm saying. And now we're having to rely a lot on information coming from other people, other institutions. Like I think this is also exposed, like, I hear a lot listening to other podcasts and just sort of following like cultural conversations, you know, that we're in this age of having trust is eroded, trust in institutions has been eroded. And we're having to depend so much on information that we're receiving, and then like, at least for me, like a lot of times feeling very inadequate to interpret, to then make like some type of, you know, moral decision about what, you know, how I'm gonna live my life in this pandemic. Like that is, it's so much more than just, am I gonna get up today and put on a mask or take my temperature or whatever. Like that's weighty, and maybe like we don't, you know, think about it that deeply every single day, but I think there might be this kind of low grade desire to feel like, well, if I can feel like I'm in the right on this, not in the right as in like I'm the ultimate source, but like what I'm doing is right, then I'm justified, and that sort of protects me against other people who might criticize the way that I'm going about things. Like I think we just have to abandon that and say, like, to a certain extent, you know, we do have to sort of go with the information that we're given and trust that these are experts who have the interest of the public in mind. And in that, when people say, okay, now we can move into a place where restrictions have lessened, and we can, to use a Southwest term, move about the cabin a little more. Like that's, you know, like I don't know why that came into my head, but maybe because I just really want to get on a plane. Like it's subconsciously sitting there. Yeah, I got my travel itch. But I just think about, you know, I've been wearing a mask going into stores and things like that, and then I went out to eat with a couple of friends on Friday, and we sat outside. There were like 4 tables total on this big patio, so we were, you know, socially distanced, and I didn't wear a mask because you don't have to, and we were in a space where that wasn't necessarily required, and you know, and I don't know if that was the right decision or not. Like, I mean, you can't really go out to eat and wear a mask, so that I made that decision going. But I don't know. I just, all of that to say, I think we have to sort of surrender the need to feel like we're right or wrong per se. It's like we're doing this again out of love of neighbor, and that is in itself completely contradictory to, you know, the trying to prove myself or trying to justify myself. I'm trying to deny myself, as Dean was talking about, to serve, you know, others. And so we sort of have to surrender that need to feel like I'm always in the right on things, and at the same time not feel lost or despairing, and just buried in all of the information and all of the because it can really, you know, it can really weigh on you and lead you into fear too. And so we have to really, I think, walk the way of Christ and try to avoid either of those ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, as we talk, I mean, I think there's a couple things that we've either brought up or just have kind of come out that, in a lot of ways, in the Christian response to this, we've seen selfishness, we've seen fear, we've seen pride, we've seen control. Like, what is the Christian and biblical way to think about the things that maybe this is exposing in us, the desires of the heart that are not in line with the Scripture, and how our tendency is to kind of, at least for me, go more towards the flesh, and what are some, and really mirror the kind of the world's response to this, and what are some ways that we can combat responding in the flesh and responding against things that we see in the Scripture.
I'm really worried about Christians. Worried is like a contradiction. I'm concerned about Christians in fear. And God, I'm convinced that God knows our minds. He made us. He knows the fallen state of our minds, the things our minds do. He knows what anxiety does to us. If anyone knows these things, the creator of the universe knows these things. What does he tell us over and over again in the Bible? Do not fear. Do not fear. Do not fear. If you challenge, so if we could say that's if God commands this over and over again, then living fearfully is a discipleship issue. So, as someone who deals with a lot of anxiety personally, I'm on medication for it, everything else, that's not okay for me to always be anxious. Now, there's some factors that cause it, and I take medication again. So, in my fallen body, there's things that don't work like they should. But that does not give me a free pass. Now, I think God provided grace in giving me some of the things like counseling and medication and friends and those type of things. But that does not mean that the scriptures that say cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you doesn't apply to me. Of course it does. So my point in this is saying that I think that we have made it this thing where we've been so influenced by the world and by social media with words like shaming to where, we want to reject shame. 100%. Shame is like the opposite of grace, the opposite of Christ. It's not shaming someone to challenge you on your fears. It's not shaming. It's not showing a lack of grace to go, why are you scared? Like, why are you so fearful of death? Can we talk through that? Or your fear is irrational. Let's look at, because you care about these things. Did you know that not 1%, but 0.1% of people in our city have it? 0.1? Does that mean that I might get it? I might, and I hope I don't. So what's the Christian posture to be different than the world? It's wisdom. That's what God gives us, not fear, not even caution. He gives us wisdom. So what does wisdom look like? I listen to the CDC. What does wisdom look like? I wash my hands. What does wisdom look like? I am constantly thinking about the mission in this city, and I don't want to do anything to compromise it. But for Christians, like when do we get to the point where it's taboo to question someone's fear? It's just become this forbidden fruit, and we use these buzzwords like shaming, we're going to be shaming somebody for. So, for example, let's say that you are completely healthy. I'm just being really transparent here. You're completely healthy. You don't have elderly parents in the context of the city or anything like that, and you refuse to come back to church until there's a vaccine. You don't think there's a discipleship question there? To go, look, can we just talk about this? That's not shaming you. That's not showing a lack of grace. And if I was condescending towards you, that's a different conversation. If I made you feel like a bad person or less of yourself or less in Christ or that I was superior to you, that's a problem. But if I just go, hey, Alex, really? Why? That's like, why would you not? You don't think that there's even the slightest little bit of risk is worth it to be with your brothers and sisters in the local church context? Like, we talk about this. That should not be taboo for us. Now, I don't have the guts to have that conversation with very many people right now. That's because I'm not stupid, but I got to plow through that too. So I think that's something on my mind a lot is when we talk about, and also when we talk about showing grace, why is it only to the people that are scared? What about those who have strong convictions that maybe that this is overkill? Mm-hmm. Are they allowed to be shown grace? Grace should be expanding everywhere, but we kind of box it into one group, and the bad guys are those who go, "Hey, is this rational?" Mm-hmm. For example, our governor says that it's okay to do this so far. Don't you think he's listening to people that know what they're doing? He's not an expert on this virus. He's a politician, but he's listening to people who are. So if they say it's okay to go X, like, don't you think it's okay for you to? I just think it's okay to have those kind of conversations, and I hope that we do. And the other side of that is how political we can be without realizing it, and how so much of our opinions are really down a party line. Al Mohler, in the Wednesday, May 27th edition of the briefing, I encourage you people to listen to that, talked about that. Isn't it interesting? I don't know who's right or wrong because I'm not an expert. But isn't it interesting that states with Republican governors are opening up faster than states with Democrat governors? I'd like to know why that is. That's just I'm not saying one or the other is better because I don't know. I'm glad our governor's opening our state, and so I can go to lunch and be out and about again, and hopefully move back towards church coming back, things like that. But I think rational Christians that want to have a biblical worldview and take every thought captive need to ask questions like that. Go, what's going on here? Why is it so politicized? What's happening here? Why do my friends who are more inclined towards this worldview, why do they think so differently about that than these people? Isn't it a virus? How do we have worldview differences on a virus? How does that work? And really think through those things and have a hard conversation about those things. But I don't know why that's the case. I really don't. But I don't even know who's right. But isn't that interesting?
Yeah, I think that shows really, and I think all of us, and maybe it's politics for some people and other things for other folks, but it shows that these things are undercurrents to the way that we really the lenses that we bring to life and to the scriptures and to how to respond. And I think it was Bruce Ashford who I heard say this, that like more often than not, we spend more time getting discipled by media, whether that's mainstream media and news outlets or Twitter, Netflix, things like that, for our worldview, than we do sit under the teaching of the scriptures and allow those to shape our hearts, our minds, and the way that we view the world. And so, to your question, Dean, it's like, it's a virus. Shouldn't our response be somewhat uniform? Obviously, people are different. There's going to be difference in opinion, but the fact that it is so driven by, the differences seem to be so driven by political worldview.
It's undeniable.
And that means something, right? Like whether one's right or wrong, I don't know. Time, I guess, will be the judge on that. But it is interesting. And then I think the other side of that too is we as Christians, and Dean, you mentioned like you're not wanting to. And I'm not either, so like I'm not putting you in a different category, but like you're not wanting to press into those people on some of those harder conversations right now because it's kind of just too delicate. But I think we are called to speak truth in love. And so for the example that you gave, for the person who's healthy, who has no vulnerable populations around them, who says like, I'm not coming back until there's a vaccine, I think it's actually a loving thing to push in there. And at the same time, if you do have those conversations with people who have legitimate concerns, to hear them, to be able to challenge them, to speak truth. And when I say speak truth, I'm not talking about whether this data set about the virus or another data set, but really like how we should view this in light of the scriptures. Like we should be able to speak those things in a way where people can actually say, regardless of the side that they're on, like they're extending grace to me. I see, maybe I don't agree with their point of view, but I see their point of view, and I have a desire to continue to walk in fellowship with this brother or sister, even though they disagree, because of the approach in which they're bringing the truth to me. And I just think that sometimes maybe that is lost, like that speaking truth in love is not always gentle. And so it takes courage for the person to bring that question up, but it also takes courage on the person maybe bringing up the challenge to receive the feedback from the other person. And, I just think that like there's too much kind of, I don't know, maybe the idea that like we're trying too often to change people's minds rather than actually kind of speak truth in love and hear them out and where they are and walk with them, as opposed to just be like, no, you should be where I am on any issue.
See where they're at, then speak to that based on where they are. That's really helpful, Alex. That's a good take.
I think too, just like as you guys are talking, like how all of this is revealing how much everybody has a worldview, but I feel like it's sort of revealed how much people cling to like it's just proved the reality of how our worldview really, whatever it is and whatever it's based in, determines how we live our lives and how we interpret the world around us. And so I think for the church, what an opportunity for us to really try to reach people in that, to say that the Christian worldview is the best framework for interpreting a global pandemic that has killed tons and tons of people and brought a lot of fear and really sent us spiraling into a lot of crazy places. And so I think if we can be aware, if the church can be aware of that, and if we as Christians can be aware of that, to always keep that in mind, that we have the best news and we have the best way to interpret the world that we live in. I think about Jesus's words. He's in John. He says, "My peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you, and I do not give as the world gives." And I think the world, in the sense of, all of us broken, fallen human beings, gives fear and disillusionment and anger and selfishness and all of these things. Like, if we look at what the world is giving us, and that's not to say that there are a lot of good things happening in the world, obviously, like from Christians and non-Christians. Like there is, God is working good in the world through all different kinds of means. But if we look collectively at all of the evil that exists in the world and what that gives to us, and then we look at Christ, who gave us peace, and he's the source of that. Like, he gives us something that nobody else can give us. I don't know, I was just thinking about that, how God does not give as the world gives. And so we who know that if we can give to other people in that way, whether that's giving encouragement, giving a challenge in a loving and gentle way, giving grace, all of these things that we've talked about, giving self-sacrifice, however, and Jesus spoke those words, before he was even crucified. So it's just, I just think about that. And he says, the world will know you by the way that you know that you're my followers by the way that you love one another. If the world looks at how the church is dealing with this, and goodness, don't go on Twitter, because you will be filled with lots of hopelessness. I think, at least I am. I have to stay off Twitter for the most part. It gives me anxiety right now. If people can look and say, wow, City Church, even among their members, there's disagreement about how to go about all of these things, but wow, they love each other. And that, what a testament that is, versus, we're all arguing, or there's lots of discord or hurt feelings or whatever. It's like, if we can bear with one another in love, I think God will multiply that, and most importantly, he'll be glorified. And so I just think that we really have an opportunity there.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to kind of bring this section to a close, is to really pray that for us as individual followers of Christ, but also collectively as City Church and as the universal church, that we would have a peace from Christ that surpasses all understanding, and that there would be a bond of love that produces maybe not agreement, but unity within the church on mission together, as we try to navigate what it looks like to be faithful followers of Christ in the midst of a global pandemic.
Yeah, and what a cool thing to see brothers and sisters grow in that.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're all growing. And so I think that we need to encourage each other when we see it.
Yeah.
And so I've seen you grow there. Because the Christian life is a battle.
Yeah.
Right. That to really do believe that Jesus is better, and the Christian worldview, like Ashlyn said, really is the best answer. Okay, we can. I intellectually believe that, but I really want to be someone who lives that.
Yeah.
And that's a growth issue. As I'm trying to grow in Christ.
Yeah. As we wrap up this episode of The Local Dive, we're going to switch things over to our Local on Tap section. We'll kind of jump back to where we were at the beginning of the episode and kind of talk about the best local beach. Local is a little nebulous, is that we don't have a beach super close, but we'll say, because I'm not going to say a lake or something, because that's not a beach, but drivable in a day. You could drive there and drive home in a day while also enjoying time at the beach. Where are you going if you have a day to spend at the beach?
Oh, St. Teresa. I'm a Tallahassean through and through. Definitely St. Teresa.
You're not going to go to 30A?
It's
That's where I'm going.
Too touristy for me.
It's okay. I'll elbow people out of the way at the Great Southern Cafe.
You're the guy who drinks Starbucks and eats Chick-fil-A, and it's too touristy.
Dude, St. Teresa's very mainstream. Who goes there?
That's fair. But
no, but I just feel when I'm at 30 again, I enjoy. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy going there, and I'm grateful that my family has my uncle has a place there. I'm really grateful for it. I think it's a fun place, but I love going there when it's like. Answer your phone, Alex.
Sorry.
I love going there. Take your pills, whatever that alarm meant. So I like going there in non-peak times. Let's put it that way. I love it in December. I really do. Yeah.
That's good.
December is probably your like peak beach time anyways.
It is. Yeah. I love going to St. Teresa. I think I know every person that has a house there. It's just like its own little community. And you have to be invited to go when you get it's very private. But when I do, I always take the chance to get on there. I preach at their beach church every year. You know, that's my spot.
That's awesome. Ashlyn, you said 30A.
Yeah.
Any beach on 30A in particular?
I mean, I'm really not picky. Like I don't have a beach house down there, so I'm not like, well, I prefer Seagrove over, yeah, Dean, you can raise your pinky. Yeah, that's like peak pinky raise when you have a family beach house down there and you don't pick that beach to go.
Yes.
I just need to hate on that for a second. I'm kidding.
Noted.
But not deserved.
But no, I mean, I like anywhere because here's the thing. I can also I'm fine going onto the beach at 30A. I also will just go for a day and make my way through, Seaside and Rosemary. There's something different in every little area. And then you can end at the mall in Destin or Miramar or whatever that is.
True.
So I have a whole routine.
Yeah.
I have this on lock,
scheduled out.
actually. Yeah.
And again, I do like it. I mean, especially my uncle Richard and Aunt Sue y'all know them are some of the most amazing people you'll ever meet, and they're just very generous with their home. So I do like going down there because the cool thing about being down there is, like Ashlyn just said, there is a long list of things you can do.
Yeah.
St. Teresa, you sit with your friends
on the beach.
You just want to go chill and read a book. That's the spot.
Yeah, no, that is fun.
Yeah, I'm going Cape San Blas. I actually haven't been back since Hurricane Michael because they got hit really hard. But it's a great spot. I found.
Is it dog friendly?
It is dog friendly, and that is part of the driver. So we'll go for the day. We found a beach access where. Dean, you mentioned earlier, the person dragging the wagon back from the beach who looks miserable. You have to walk it feels like a mile through sand dunes from this beach access, but it's worth it because when you get there, you are the only people on the beach for a long distance. And
mile?
It feels like a mile.
Remember, feelings matter more than data. It is a mile. It is a mile.
Fair point. It's 2020.
I am out. No way.
But it's great. We take our dog. He loves it. We love it. It's quiet. It's relaxing. And then on the way back, similar to Ashlyn's kind of pre-planned route, we will stop in Apalachicola, grab dinner at Up the Creek Raw Bar, grab some oysters. It's a great way to spend a day.
What's your preferred way? How do you take your oysters?
Generally steamed on a saltine with Tabasco.
Nice. I knew you would have a style.
Yeah.
Maybe in a gumbo, and that'd be the only way I ever would eat them.
Yeah, I mean, I'll eat them raw. I'll eat them Rockefeller, but steamed is my go-to.
Nice.
So. Cool. Well, that brings us to the close of another episode of The Local Dive. We are grateful that you would listen. We'd love if you wouldn't mind, if you haven't already, to subscribe wherever you are listening to this podcast. Also, we'd love for you to continue the conversation with us on social media, on Instagram or on Twitter at The Local Dive Pod. You can also drop a line and let us know if there's any future topics that you'd love to hear us discuss. But go ahead and share with your friends as well. And we look forward to another episode next week where we talk about the gospel and our identity in Christ versus our identity in the world. Thanks for listening. See you next week. Thanks for listening to the Local Dive Podcast, a podcast where we share our deep and shallow musings about Christ, the church, and culture. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we'd encourage you to subscribe, and we'd really appreciate if you leave a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also continue the conversation with us on social media, on Instagram and Twitter at The Local Dive Pod. We'll see you next week as we dive into another episode.